all. Thank you for joining us today for the Education Subcommittee meeting. We wanted to have this meeting to kind of go over SOP training so that we can have something standardized for the national program. We know that we're lucky to have a lot of new staff that are coming in. I met a few at the training and I am new myself, so this is something that I think could be really mutually beneficial to the program. Without further ado, we'll go on to our next slide. So this is the agenda for the day. These are the questions that we're going to be discussing. So one is, why did your program create or dedicate time and resources to document SOPs? The second question is the format of your SOP agency-wide, bureau-wide, or something that the SBEEP developed? 3, do you have a plan on how to keep SOPs up to date? So our speakers today will be going through 1 to 3 in order. As you see the questions listed, that's how they'll be asked. And there will be an opportunity for you to ask other questions at the end. We do ask that if you have additional questions along the presentation that you type those into the chat. If we don't have time to get to your questions today, we'll be recording those questions and we'll work on answering them in an FAQ document, and then we can post that onto the SB page along with the recording of today's meeting. So here's our panelists for today. I'm going to go ahead and click off my camera and I'm going to pass the torch over to Gabe.
Thank you, Gina. My name is Gabe Catanacci, and I am a regulatory assistance specialist with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, and I serve as Colorado's Small Business Ombudsman. In addition to my role as SBO, I also manage the Tier 2 data for the state for hazardous chemicals stored during a calendar year. I've been with the department for almost 2 years now, and before we go into discussion, I think it's important to discuss briefly how our program is structured. Our Section 507 program is housed in the regulatory agency, with our Small Business Assistance Program being in the Air Division, and my role as SBO being in the Division of Environmental Health and Sustainability. And so we do, while we are in the same regulatory agency, have separations by division. And our program is multimedia with a priority focus on air and secondary focuses on hazardous waste, water, energy, land use, and pollution prevention. And I will pass it over to Arthur to introduce himself.
Thank you, Gabe. My name is Arthur, and I am the Assistant Director here at the SBEEP in Kansas. And I guess to kind of give a little bit of a background, kind of like Gabe did on how their program is set up. Ours is actually not part of the regulatory agency here in Kansas. That regulatory body is the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. We are actually located under the College of Engineering at Kansas State University, which is the land-grant university here in Kansas. Our larger umbrella organization is the Pollution Prevention Institute, which of course focuses in on pollution prevention principles for businesses of all sizes. But underneath that is the Kansas Small Business Environmental Assistance Program. We here at Kansas have, 5 specialists who were involved to varying levels with the SBEEP program. It was originally started with water, but it has blossomed out into dealing with hazardous solid waste, underground storage tanks, dry cleaners, NPDES issues with clean water. So we've managed to stick our fingers in lots of pies, but certainly that necessitates having good SOPs, which is what we're here to talk about today. So with that said, I will then turn it over to Sarah to introduce herself.
Thank you, Arthur. I'm Sarah Johnson. I'm with the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, and I'm with the Small Business Technical Assistance Program. I represent the SBEEP as well as the SBO, since I am only one person. It's a one-person program. Currently located in the Air Resource Division. It was a recent move from the Commissioner's Office down to Air Resources. And while I may be in Air Resources, I am definitely multimedia, and I am paid through Title V fees, but because of my knowledge through pollution prevention, I do work quite a lot with hazardous waste and pollution prevention as well. And then we'll pass it back to Gabe.
Thank you, Sarah. So for the first question, why did you invest in the development of SOPs? I think there are a lot of good answers to this question, but I think the main reason for developing SOP, or the main benefit, comes from creating it for those types of areas that are considered routine assistance or routine processes. I think it's fair to say that we all have a set of questions that we commonly receive from businesses, whether it's APEN or generator assistance questions. And these types of questions really lend themselves well to developing an SOP, because it allows us to develop a standardized approach for these common assistance questions, so that not only our assistants, but also the rest of our team are approaching these questions the same way, creating a more cohesive front for our small business assistants. And by having a standardized approach for these common questions, it also reduces the time and having to come up with a unique set of answers each time we see one of these questions. Jesse Walters within our small business assistance program has been working a lot on creating templates for these common requests in diesel engines, solvents, and incinerators, for instance. I think another important benefit from SOPs relates to creating documentation to help with the training and continuity of services for new staff members. A lot of states that I have spoken with have expressed that internal and external turnover has caused challenges for their programs. Internally, the administrator would have to train these new staff members, and the new staff members may be unclear on where the roles and responsibilities lie. And externally, it might be difficult for partnership organizations to facilitate collaboration if they have turnover as well. So developing SOPs can help the administrator internally with the onboarding and training process for new staff members, and can also allow these new staff members to have a better understanding of where these roles and responsibilities lie. For these external partnerships you have, creating SOPs for how you interact with them or how you conduct outreach with them can also help standardize your program function. I think a good example of what we've done in Colorado in this vein is our memorandum of understanding that we created between the air and environmental health and sustainability divisions. As I briefly mentioned in my introduction, our roles are separated by division, and so that can cause issues with the siloed nature of our programs. We decided to create this MOU as a means to reaffirm where our roles and responsibilities lie and what we should be doing, because this is compounded by the fact that our SIP wasn't updated since 1992, and a lot has changed in the past 30 years. And I think it may not be the first thing you think of when we're talking about SOPs that have a discussion of MOUs, but I think it does fit in this conversation because MOUs can clearly outline where the roles and responsibilities lie for each task and what they should be doing, and delineates the responsibilities. And this could be helpful because it provides a document for the staff members to reference in case there are new staff coming on, or in case existing staff members need to reaffirm what they should be doing. I think similar approaches with other state programs could be beneficial to have MOUs, especially if your program is separated in some capacity, like Colorado, where you have multiple the SBO and the SBAP in separate divisions, or if you have multi-agency like some with the SBDC and the regulatory agency carrying on some of the Section 507 programming. The last piece I'll touch on is that SOPs for program evaluation, I think, are imperative, because especially when you're talking about multi-year analysis of outcomes, of metrics, you want to ensure that you're tracking and analyzing this data the same way from year to year to increase the reliability of the data itself. And with that, I will pass it over to Arthur to talk about Kansas.
Thank you very much, Gabe. Those are great points. I guess I've got, I don't want to rehash on some of the good things that you had brought up. I guess I've got two main points I really were sticking out in my mind when approaching this particular question about why our program created or dedicates time and resources to document these SOPs. And one of the big ones, of course, as Gabe mentioned, is personnel changes. I was new to the SBEAT program just 7 years ago. And prior to that, I was a KDHE employee for a number of years. And so I knew the state system, but I didn't necessarily know the SBEAT system. And I guess that's one of the things that maybe overlooked is that these things, SOPs, are not only good for training new employees, but they also empower new employees to make sure that they are doing the right thing. If they know that this is how something needs to be done and they're looking at a job to get done, they can compare A to B right from the very first day and say, yes, this matches, or no, wait a second, I think we messed up here. That's a big thing. And I know sometimes just reading regulations when we train new people, or have them sit down and go over this, that, or the other, a lot of times it can get confusing or boring to an employee. But if you have something that directly affects what they're going to be doing in the field, it sticks with them. And having that SOP, a well-written one, certainly is not just a tool of control over a new person, but also allows that new person to feel like they are indeed empowered to do the right thing. The other piece I guess I'd like to talk about is the quality of service that comes along, not only with the efficiency, like Gabe mentioned, about having an SOP, so you're not wasting a lot of time repeating the same processes over again. You've got a good established method of doing them, and you can continue with that. But that also increases the quality of the work that is done, knowing that everything has gone through these standard checks. And that's something I know that we here in Kansas really pride ourselves on, is that submit something to one of our clients, be it the federal or state agency, that it has gone through a number of checks, and that we are indeed certain when we hand something over that it's been through an editor, or that it's been looked over by other eyes. So I think that I'll stick with that right now. And with that, I will turn it over to Sarah.
So this is why we do this as a panel. We all do things a little differently and for different reasons. So being a one-person program, it was really about what I experienced when I came into the program, as well as what I wanted to leave behind. When I started this job, my predecessor was excellent at what he did. However, he left me nothing. I had a vague idea of what he did. I had electronic files, I had paper files, but I really didn't understand the breadth of stuff that he was doing, or I should be doing. And then my administrators, I've had 3 different administrators, and they were all wonderful administrators, yet they only had a vague idea of what this program meant and what it could be. And so back in 2017, I was like, I'm not doing this to the next person. I don't have an assistant I'm training to move up. I want them to have something to start from. I never thought the next person would have to do everything I did. The next person is going to have a different skill set and talent and passion to whatever they want to make this their own job, how they want to run it. But I wanted a starting point from them. So having everything written down, and then realizing as things change in the few years, I would have to change those SOPs to match what I'm currently doing, or new opportunities came up. It became really exciting. And maybe it was a little scary and also kind of awesome too at the same time. When you write down everything you do, you kind of go, holy cow, I do all of this, and you won't know that until you write it down. And then you can see where the opportunities are to expand in certain areas once you know where you're going. So one of my favorite ones that I created was partnerships. I spend a lot of time and effort collaborating and creating partnerships internally as well as externally. But by having those written down, that next person coming up will be like, oh, right, they did a project with them, and this is who to talk to if I want to continue that project. Or, oh, I didn't realize that I could do stuff like this because there's an SOP on it. I get to do things like this now. And so for me, it was more about that legacy of leaving something for the next person, so they would have a starting point of what they do, and not to feel like, well, where do I go from here? It's like, well, actually, here's where we start, and this is where you can go from here, or even farther. And it's just more of an opportunity. And the other thing I really wanted to do with the SOPs was to make the connection to National Steering Committee. There is an SOP I have that this is why you do the annual report and you submit your data. Here are the reasons why. Here is that consistent data. This is how you set up your measure tracking reporting system, because that's our system at New Hampshire, is how to track your data. Set that up like the annual report, so you have all that information there, so you don't have to search for it later. It's just an easy way to be more efficient and creative. And if you're more efficient, you have more time to do new things too. And that's really what I wanted to do. And I'm going to pass it on back to Gabe for the next question.
So as far as the format goes for Colorado, I can really only speak to what my division has in place, and we don't necessarily have any explicit format requirements for internal documents related to a particular position. But I will say a lot of our SOPs that are developed are formatted in a way to have a dual function. The first function is to provide standardized steps for businesses to follow. And the second piece is to serve as a reference point for us as the assistant members to use to find relevant links and information on a particular issue. So a lot of the SOPs that Jesse and the Small Business Assistance Program create are created with the business in mind to use, as well as our own program to use internally. And because a lot of our SOPs are public facing, we are subject to certain department requirements related to accessibility. Last year, our department had created a new initiative to make all web pages screen reader accessible. And so when you were talking about formatting, accessibility does play a big role in that. And for screen readers, it can include things like ensuring the headings, the text box are formatted in a way that wouldn't be picked up by a screen reader, because even having a color-coded heading or a line break between sections can get picked up by a screen reader and really make the flow of the information disjointed. Secondly, you really want to organize the content in a simple fashion and avoid multiple columns of text, because if you have a table with multiple columns, a screen reader is going to read from left to right and pick up line items as one continuous line between columns rather than separating up by column, which again misconstrues the information of the text. And lastly, screen readers really struggle with the figures presented on a web page, and so including alternate text is important to convey the message you want from the figures in a way that can be picked up by the screen reader. I think when we're talking about format more generally, the two questions you should be asking yourself is, who is the audience and what is the nature of the SOP? For internal SOPs, I think it really benefits to have it as informal and simple as possible. Having a step-by-step instruction or a flow chart with applicable images makes it really easy to follow along. If you have an SOP that is really extensive, including a table of contents can be helpful to link exactly to the information that you are trying to find. And I think it's really important to consult with who's actually going to be using the SOP, because something that is really easy for you to understand may be more challenging for somebody else. So if there's multiple people that are going to be using one SOP, bring them to the table when you're actually developing it to ensure that it is as easy to follow as can be. And lastly, as we'll discuss the next question as well, create a plan for updating the information to ensure that the SOP doesn't become stagnant over time. All right, Arthur, what do you have to say on this question?
Great, thank you, Gabe. I guess you hit again a lot of the really good points, and bringing up the fact that the audience and the purpose of the SOP, of course, is going to be the big driver. Since we are not part of a regulatory agency, we're part of a university, our SOPs are not publicly facing. They are more for internal use. We can produce them to any of our clients should they want to take a look at them, but mainly it's for our own use. And I can say that in the 7 years that I've been here at the Kansas PPI, that we've got an evolution that's happened with our formatting and kind of the way that our SOPs look. I know when I first got here, as we got new projects and expanded into new areas with different media types with KDHE, we started to have need for new SOPs, and that was one of the things I know that Nancy immediately set me on when I first hired on, was to, all right, if you're going to be doing a site visit or looking at like for example an automatic tank gauge on an underground storage tank site, write up an SOP about how you would go about doing that. And at the time, it's maybe doesn't always ring true to the new employee, but over time, as you're here, you begin to see the effect of having those SOPs, making sure that everything again is done in accordance with a certain procedure, and that that something that was done 2-3 years ago is going to have the same quality as something that was done last month. I guess in saying that, we have increased or improved our formatting for our SOPs. Again, it used to just be kind of a basic list that we would include as a separate file in one of our project files. You know, bigger ones with reports and all that kind of information in there. We'd always have an SOP as well. Now we've got a small volume of SOPs that we use regularly, and we've kind of organized it to where now we can track the dates at which it's been revised, who's done the revisions. It's a lot more informative and a little bit more formal with separate sections and not just basically a list of basic instructions. But they still, despite all that, as Gabe mentioned, have remained very useful and very easy to read and follow and understand for the person who's out in the field following. I think that's pretty much all I've got. I will say that I certainly sympathize with the folks who are part of the regulatory agencies, and knowing that these things could be FOIA'd. I could imagine if we were under that same kind of pressure, that ours would look quite a bit differently than what they do. But for right now, they certainly seem to get the job done and improve our quality as we march forward. So, Sarah, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. All right, so for my format, we actually do have a standard format for SOPs if, and only if, it has to do with money or finances. So if I was managing grants or taking in credit cards or collecting personal identification information from people, then I would have to follow the DES format. Since I do not, I have just a very simple format that I stole from another program here at the agency. It's very short and sweet. You're going to see it later on. It's a very standard title. It's a very standard summary at the top to say, this is why the SB tab participates in this activity. And then it has a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through 10, whatever numbered step by step of how you do this particular job or stuff. The only key part to this is I link to key programs for internal or external web pages, internal publications as a reference. Like if you need to create a new document, here are the people you need to talk to. Here's the guidance document, so you don't have to search on our intranet to find that, which will be interesting since we just updated our intranet. I guess that's the next question of how we maintain it. So our intranet has just changed to SharePoint. So now all my links have to be updated. So I will be updating those soon eventually. So yeah, so the only document that has more than one page is my SOP for your small business ombudsperson role. I felt that one is a very interesting role, and I would love to see other people's examples if they have that. I included examples with, all right, here's a case with XYZ company, and this is the process I worked with them, versus here's a different company, and this is how I managed to get this resolved. This is conflict resolution. Here's this example. So they could go into that file, electronic file, paper file, whatever it is, to review, oh, this is how this was resolved, and why it was resolved like this. And so they would have a little bit of idea. So that's a little bit longer document that also is updated as a new case comes about. I try to include that if it's something different. And it's really, like we've said multiple times, it's about consistency. We want to be consistent in how we do our job. We want to be consistent in how we manage our clients, our partners, and SOPs are one of the ways to try to do that. And I think the data collection stuff is important too. And I would love to figure out how I'm going to do more data collection within my SOPs. But it's really about what's best for me. I wrote it because me, since it's not outward facing, although I do share it with various groups that have asked for it. It is just mine. It's not even in our intranet. It's just on my files, and it can be shared with people who ask, but it's not something I share with anybody else. That said, sometimes I do have it reviewed just to make sure I'm making sense, or if there's something I'm forgetting as a task that I do, I will ask outside within my administration or another program to review it just for technicalities. And that's it for me. Gabe?
All right, so on to the last question. How do you plan to keep SOPs up to date? So a lot of the way that we in Colorado keep SOPs up to date has to do with how our small business assistance program conducts its assistance. And I would say that our program has what I'd call a project focus model where the staff members would identify an emerging sector or a sector that needs assistance, research that sector, and then create guidance documents and SOPs related to that particular sector. And I think this project sector model encourages us to continually review SOPs because each take on a new project focus from year to year. K1 for instance, has in the past worked with breweries and cannabis, and currently Jared and Jesse are working on hospitals, schools, food waste, natural medicine, and data centers as well. For my role in particular, we're also trying to build it in a way to where I re-engage with these sectors that our small business assistance program has worked with in the past to not only reinforce these relationships with them, but also identify if there's any changes or any additional need that needs to be reflected in our SOPs. So as I'm re-engaging with these previous sectors, we're trying to update SOPs as we go along. And in the next couple of months, I'll be working with manufacturers and auto body shops in particular. Some other things I think is important to track when it comes to changes are federal and state statutes, because if there's any changes coming down the regulatory pipeline at the federal or state level, you really want to ensure that your SOPs reflect the most recent regulatory updates. And a similar capacity, if there's any governor or department initiatives, you also want to track those as well, as administration changes or changes in executive leadership within your agency can also influence the direction of your program. So you really want to make sure that your SOPs are not in conflict with those initiatives. And lastly, I think the fairly obvious one is if you have any changes to contact information for staff members, you really want to make sure that the information in the SOP reflects the actual contact points, whether it's contacts with project partners or internal contacts as well. And that concludes what I have for this question, so I will pass it on to Arthur.
Great. Thank you, Gabe. For us, again, we don't have outward-facing SOPs, so ours is more internal. But we do have some that we use much more frequently than others, and we try to review those on a yearly basis. Realistically, we can look at them on a yearly basis. Do we always get a chance to get them edited? Sometimes it takes having a student worker or having one of our part-time folks with a little bit of extra time to be able to devote to the issue. But luckily, we've been able to kind of piecemeal that together. And for our main SOPs that we use quite frequently, which would be ones dealing with generally putting together our publications and reports, and another one dealing with our site visits, those affect most all the programs that we work with. And so we will try to review those a little bit more frequently. On some of the ones that maybe are a little bit more on an as-needed basis, we approach those. For example, we had a project that I worked on a few years ago that dealt with the ready-mix concrete industry and some of their wastewater. Before we set out and went out and actually started doing the work, we created a very specific SOP. It wasn't very long, but it dealt specifically with that ready-mix environment and what the specifics of the project were. Now we will keep that in the file. Should we ever do more work with the ready-mix industry, we will obviously keep that in our back pocket so we don't have to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. But aside from that, that's usually how we approach things. We have our basic core set of SOPs that affect most of our routine functions, and we try to try to visit those repeatedly, like I said, on a yearly or at least bi-yearly basis. Aside from that, for the most part, it's on an as-needed basis if we have to create new ones or modify new ones because of project requirements. So I think that's pretty much all I have. I will turn it over to Sarah.
All right, thank you. So like I sort of told before, I have some updates to be made because our intranet pages have changed. Within my work plan, I'm supposed to be updating one SOP every month, and I have not succeeded to actually follow that idea, even though that's what I really want to do. What is happening is, as things change, or something is added, or for example, I am new to the environmental justice subcommittee, so I've updated that SOP. I've added doing a search for site visits, whether or not they're in an EJ area of concern. So that criteria had to be changed within that, how I do my research for my site visits. And so as needed, things are getting updated, not as frequently as they need to be. I'm at the point where I'm going to have to like dedicate an hour every week just to try to catch up with all the little things that are happening, because things do change. It's kind of amazing where you think you're doing the job like ABC all the time, and then it switches up and you're like, why did I change? Oh, right. An opportunity came up, something better happened, a new database was created, a new partnership was created, a policy change from the governor, whatever it may be. Keeping those up to date are pretty important, and also remembering of like, oh, right, I used to do it like this is better, this is not so good, whatever it may be. They do need to be updated and maintained. Haven't figured out exactly how to do that, but we are still working on that. I think that's all I have to say for that. And yes, that's it. All right, Gina.
All right, now we're moving on to the examples portion of the presentation. Oh, sorry about that, Gabe. You take it away.
No problem, Gina. I was just going to say the same thing. So we wanted to provide a couple snapshots of some SOPs we developed in Colorado, one that was internal and one that was public facing. This first one you see here is a SOP related to our database. And we have our own database program here related just to the Small Business Assistance Program that tracks all of the contact points and assistance provided by each of our staff members. And so it catalogs the emails, the type of assistance, the person we interacted with, and also serves as a platform to provide benchmarks so you can have completed or in progress assistance tracking in the system here. And it was really important to create an SOP because one, the system is very old, and two, it's kind of hard to follow along. And so Jesse had created this SOP to provide information on how to not only navigate the system, but also how you should be cataloging this information. Because as I said in the first question, I believe, you really want to ensure that you have the same process of tracking metrics. You really want to make sure that you have the same process of tracking metrics from year to year to ensure that you have that reliability of analysis so you can draw your conclusions on a solid platform. And you'll see it's a pretty simple format here. As I expressed in one of the questions, you really want to, if it's just an internal document, keep it as simple as possible. Use images whenever possible to make it really clear on what the steps look like and how you should be flowing through the instructions. And you can go to the next slide, please, Gina. This is an example of what one of our public-facing SOPs looks like. This is on one of our air pages, and the Small Business Assistance Program updates this, I believe, yearly or so. And on the same page, it also has instructions on our new EJ rule, and this one here is related explicitly to APENs. And what I wanted to convey in the earlier questions is that this information is not only for businesses, it's also used by myself as an SBO, as well as our small business assistance team. And you'll see here, it has instructions that are clearly laid out, as well as relevant links. And I think the links are really important because we have a pretty robust library of information and guidance documents that are broken up by sector. And so we wanted to create a place that has all the information related to APENs in one clear path, but also provide more information to link elsewhere if they need to dive into specific sectors, whether it is oil and gas, you'll see on the top point there. And we also included relevant contact points as well, so the businesses have a place and know exactly where they should be interacting with. And I think that's just a brief overview of some of the SOPs we're using here. These are obviously just snippets of what they actually look like, and so they can be more exhaustive. So if you'd like to have more information, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to send those along. And I will pass it on now to Arthur to talk about Kansas SOP.
All right, thank you, Gabe. And I've got a couple of the SOPs here. The first one I guess I'd like to talk about is our site visit SOP. And like I mentioned, we are not just an air-focused state when it comes to our SBEAT program. We do all sorts of media as well as do pollution prevention work. And so this SOP has been kind of a bit of a catch-all, if you will, to go over all of those possible situations in which we might be out doing a site visit. And so, as you can see, ours is not maybe quite as formal as what Colorado was just showing. Again, ours are just for internals. And as you can see, it's a little bit more written like a cookbook, if you will, about what to do and how to prepare and going through things point by point. On the second page, and I apologize, I didn't didn't utilize as much of the space on the slide as probably I could have. But there's a third page to this that goes on and links to specific files within our Microsoft Cloud storage that go over good examples of reports or good examples of different things that might be needed. It could be our photo release page that we have, we make everybody sign when we go to their site visits. If we're taking pictures, we want to make sure that we have their expressed written permission to do so. So that is something that would be included in this. But again, just making sure that all of those things that Kansas is a big state too, I will say. When you leave Manhattan and you get all the way down to Southwest Kansas, down by Garden City or Dodge City, that's 5 hours away from our office. So it's not like you can just easily swing back and pick up something if you forget it. And these SOPs really make sure that we are focused in on what we're getting ready to do when we go out and do these site visits. And let's see, Gina, can you go to the next slide? Or did I just give you the, okay, awesome. This is another SOP that I would like to kind of point out a bit. This is our publications. And I'm sure as you guys be part of the regulatory environment or kind of tangential to it a bit like us, you do many different types of communication, especially written communication. And what do you do in all of those particular situations? You know, is it a letter report? Is it a report that's going to the EPA for a grant? Is it a report going to a client that you need to keep very simple and pared down? You know, what exactly is the purpose of the report or the publication that you're putting together? And this procedure that we've got right here kind of goes through all of those potential scenarios and make sure that we get the right review done for the right publication. And I know that one's been a very at times tricky one for us because, like I say, we've got a number of different medias, a number of different bureaus within our Department of Health and Environment that we work with, as well as different federal agencies like the USDA or the EPA. And each one of those have different requirements. Making sure that you hit all of those marks can be difficult, especially when you've got many specialists working at the same time on all of those areas. And this really has helped us out quite a bit. And I know Nancy has been doing good to make sure that all new folks that come on board keep this particular SOP near and dear to their hearts, to make sure that we do indeed get all of our things our boxes checkmarked that we need to. So I think that's all I have for right now, and I will pass it along to Sarah.
Thank you, Arthur. All right, so talk about simplicity. I mean, that's just simple as can be for me. So this is the National Steering Committee membership. It was very important to me to have some type of document that let people know that if you're in this role, you need to participate in the National Steering Committee and how to do that. And that is as simple as contacting the person to get to the new chair of the NSC. I am new to this role and this is who you need to meet. You need to get onto the listservs. Here's are the various groups that you could join. I really wanted that the next person to realize that this network was important. The collaboration you will have with this group, the activities like this are very important, and that helps us do a better job by communicating with each other. And I didn't want to lose that like we have in some of the other states in the area. I really wanted that connection to continue. So it's a very simple one. As you can see, a couple links, a couple suggestions. As you say, it also refers to another SOP about the annual report, just really trying to create a document that goes, that you can, the next person can go, oh yeah, I should do that. I'll put that on my list to do. It's been, like I said, it's been revised 3 times. I've added things, I've changed things. Just as simple as I can be is how I want to do things. And that's really all I have to say about that. So thank you.
So that brings us to the end of our formal presentation, but now that we have a few minutes left, we would like to open up the chat to any questions that anybody may have had that came along throughout the course of the presentation. We don't have any that have been provided in the chat, but please, if there's something that you're thinking of or discussion that you'd like to have at this time, turn on your camera and turn on your microphone, and we would love to get those questions answered for you. And if not, I guess then maybe we just have an early closeout to today's meeting. But I'm sure there has to be at least one question out there.
Or we can stop the recording, and that way
Okay.
we can ask if anybody wants to ask a question
Okay.
while not being recorded. Yeah.
All right, we can stop the recording then. Nancy, if you'd like to stop.